Hi everyone, so I chose to do my diversity field experience on mental health disorders. So questions about mental health disorders. What did I know before this project? I'll be honest, I didn't know a whole lot, and that was one of the main reasons why I thought it would be interesting to kind of go out of my comfort zone and learn a little bit more about it. Why did I choose this topic? It's kind of related, like I said, go out of my comfort zone, learn a little bit more, but I also do have a cousin who was recently diagnosed with some different mental health disorders, so I thought it'd be interesting to kind of gain a little insight on what he might be dealing with. And then how did I develop the questions? This is actually really interesting because I actually reached out to Facebook and said, hey, this is such a common topic. If you have any questions that you've been curious about, wondering, I'm interviewing these people, so let me know and I'll get back to you with their answers. So I actually did get a lot of questions that way. Most of them were anonymous. And then through that, I actually had two people reach out to me saying, that they would like to share their story with me. So I actually interviewed a total of 4 people too. So the questions I asked: when were you diagnosed with each disorder? What does it feel like when experiencing each disorder? Which tasks do you find challenging due to your mental health disorder? Do you try to control your mental health disorders? Do you feel like there is a behavior you must maintain to function with society? Have you seen any change with your mental health disorder, whether that's progress or increasing symptoms? And has anyone in your family suffered from the same or similar mental health disorders? Again, and these were all questions compiled by my friends on Facebook and friends at work, and just general people who are curious about mental health disorders. All right, so the first person I interviewed is 27 years old, and she's an elementary school teacher. She is diagnosed with perinatal mood and anxiety disorder, PTSD, postpartum depression and anxiety, and major seasonal depressive disorder. And she was diagnosed with all these within the last year. Some key topics that I kind of gained from her interview. She was diagnosed after the birth of her son. So some of the big ones, the PTSD, the postpartum depression, those were all after she was diagnosed with all those after the birth of her son, because she actually endured some pretty traumatic labor experiences. I believe she was in labor for over 2 days. So a big topic that she kind of covered with me is that she cannot anticipate her triggers. So this kind of triggers something that triggers the PTSD or the depression, anything like that. She kind of explained if she sees a doctor walking on the street, that can kind of trigger it, and that's something you have no control over, so that can be pretty difficult for her. With the PTSD, she explained that her body literally takes her back to the scenario. So for example, if she's taken back to her labor experience, she said she can actually feel the pain in her abdominal, and she can hear the doctors yelling at her, and it's those things that kind of make it so realistic to her. Another thing that's important is that she said her mind will sometimes develop dangerous situations. For example, she was in a school meeting and they were talking about what to do if a shooter comes into the school, and she said her mind will actually develop the whole scenario that is so realistic, and that she can have panic attacks from that and anything like that too. Her family members, a few of them do have depression, so they've been able to kind of help her coping with that. However, her situation is a little bit more different just because it is postpartum depression as well as seasonal depression. Some things that she struggles with would be phone calls and emails. She said that's a big thing with her anxiety. And then also going to work. She said she had called into work sick in the past a lot lately, and she's working on that. She said it's just so hard. Sometimes she can't even get out of bed because the depression's so bad. But because she's a teacher, she understands that she needs to be there more. She hasn't been able to go to the doctor's office since giving birth just because of her traumatic experience. And then also her family. Her and her husband initially wanted to have 4 kids, but after this one experience, she honestly doesn't know if she's going to be able to have any more kids. Something important that I took from her interview, one thing she wanted everyone to know, is that no one would think less of you if you saw a physical therapist for a physical injury. So no one should think less of you if you see a therapist for a mental injury. She said it's always the best thing to go seek help, even if it seems scary, if you don't know where to go, you don't have resources. She says there's always someone willing to help. There's always resources. There's information and websites and everything like that. The best thing you can do for yourself is get help. the help you need, at least. Okay, so for the second person I interviewed, she's 21. She's a pet groomer. She suffers from major depressive disorder, and she was diagnosed at age 16. Some key topics I covered with her. She kind of just talked about the depression, how it's a dark, heavy feeling on your body. You can't move, you can't get up. It just takes over your whole body. She said living is one of her biggest struggles, because you can love life one minute and then the next you just want to be gone. You wish it was all over. Things she tries to do to counteract her depression is she really tries to distract her mind. If she feels it coming on, she'll kind of like call up a friend to hang out or maybe play a video game just to kind of take her mind off it a little bit. She does have family members that were also diagnosed with depression. Her brother did outgrow it, so she's hoping that she outgrows it as well. And then one thing she wanted everyone to know about her mental health disorder. She said, I know I have an amazing life. I know I couldn't ask for anything more. I know there are kids dying and starving and people losing loved ones, but none of that changes the fact that there is a chemical imbalance in my brain. And I think that's so important because oftentimes people think, oh, why are they sad? They didn't have anything happen to them. Like they have a good life. And like she just explained, that's not the case sometimes. It's just the makeup of your brain. So I think it's important to kind of get that message across too. So for the third person I interviewed, he's 19 and he's an art school student. He suffers from ADD, PTSD, major depressive disorder, anxiety, insomnia, executive function disorder, emotional detachment, and drug abuse. And he was beginning to get diagnosed with these at the beginning of 8th grade. So some key topics I covered with him. He's actually a family member of mine, so this one kind of hit home a little bit. It was really interesting to hear his story from his point of view and not just my aunt's or my grandma's. He actually did break his back in a car accident. He was in that kind of impairs him from doing basic everyday things like driving or standing for long periods of time. So that kind of has made him a little bit depressed too. He was a victim of sexual abuse, and then his brother actually did end up committing suicide, and he was the one to discover his brother in the backyard. So that was a pretty traumatic experience for him as well. He said when he has his panic attacks, hundreds of images are flashing through his brain at once. He said it starts off slow and then it's all at once, and he just can't do anything about it. He said these mostly happen in cars, just because that's where his big accident happened that dramatically changed his life. So yeah, things like I kind of said before, eating, sleeping, self-care, and anything productive are things that he struggles with. He is going to therapy currently. He's not on any medication just because he did have a drug addiction problem. But one thing he wanted everyone to know is that we as are doing the best we can, being people with mental health disorders, that they're people too, they're trying their hardest, and that you can't judge them for what they're going through just because you don't know firsthand what they're experiencing. So then the last person I interviewed was 22 years old and she's a college student. She has borderline personality disorder, panic disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, major depression, PTSD, and then she also had symptoms of eating disorders. However, she was not ever formally diagnosed with that. She began to get diagnosed for these disorders beginning at age 17. Some key topics I kind of covered with her. She was talking about how it's kind of a snowball effect sometimes, how the panic attack happens and then that triggers her low self-esteem, and then that would trigger her depression, and it all just kind of keeps spiraling. So that can be pretty difficult to maintain. She explained how sometimes she's pretty high functioning and sometimes she's low functioning. So depending on the setting, a lot of times she said if she's at school, then she kind of is more high functioning and keeps it together and kind of keeps looking the part kind of thing, versus when she gets home she is more free to kind of let it all out. One thing that she feels she needs to conform with in society is she needs to not be the weird girl or the crazy girl. She feels like she needs to maintain this normal identity, and not let the monster out. So that's how she kind of considered her mental health disorder to be the monster. When she's out in society, she needs to kind of maintain it. She talked about medication and therapy and kind of finding what works best for you. She's actually doing a combination of both. And then the one thing she wanted everyone to know is that we are people, and basically we're all the same, whether you have a mental health disorder or you don't. We're all the human race. We're all people, and we all have our own struggles. So just some important things to take away from this, things that I took away, is that depression can be genetic. So it's important to look out for that, whether it's in your siblings or your children, anything like that. If you or anyone in your family suffers from mental health disorders. And then another thing is that every single mental health disorder is different. So if you've met one person that has depression, you've met one person that has depression. People experience things in all different ways, and they kind of help treat it in different ways too. So there's not one case that is the same. Another thing that's important is to offer your help, but accept that they may not want it or need it. It's good to lend a helping hand, but don't be offended if they don't take that. They may be just trying things that work best for them and working through it that way. And then the last thing is that if you don't understand something, that's okay. Just make sure you're not judging people for it or anything like that. If you don't understand anything, you can ask questions. You can kind of research a little bit more like that, but just kind of keeping in mind that we all have different struggles. Some are on the outside, some are on the inside, but they're all kind of important in their own way, and they all need attention too. This was overall a very positive learning experience for me. I'm super excited about the I shouldn't say excited. I'm super impressed with what I took away from this topic, and I felt that I learned a lot and that it was a really beneficial experience for me. I hope you learned a lot from my presentation too. Thanks.